Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm reminding myself that Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, I'm sure everyone heard of Rabbi Hirsch, right? So he left the largest rabbinical position in Moravia. I think he had something like 500 synagogues that were under, it was a government position, to join, I think, something like 11 or 12 struggling families in Frankfurt. And they asked him, like, how he left, like, how could he do, why would he take such a reduction in salary and join such a, a small band of people who were fighting uphill against, the ravages of reform? And he says, because God doesn't count Jews, he weighs them. Right? That's why after Pesach and after Shabbos, I feel particularly good.
I was just going to say,
yeah.
I think I weigh a little too much.
Yeah. So it's never the amount, it's never the quantity. If it would be about quantity, Judaism is not about, democracy of, how many people are at a particular share. So Baruch Hashem, here we are. We're going to talk about motivating change, especially after Pesach, right? Because Pesach is a time, Zman Cherotzeinu, time of our great freedom. And even though we're entering into the time Zman Cheroseno, it's a big question why it was such a narrow diet on a time that's called our great freedom. It didn't feel like freedom. Maybe if you wanted to go out and eat a sandwich, you couldn't eat a sandwich unless it was a karech or something like that. So why is that freedom? Because we have the ability to say no to our lower urge in order to gain the possibility of a higher expression. We know that Pesach doesn't end when Pesach is over. It's the beginning. We left Pesach with the counting of Sfira that leads us up to Shavuos. So it was only really like a launching. Pesach is a launching to get to better places. So, yeah, sure.
Before the students of Rabbi Akiva, I've asked this before, but I never got like such a great answer. Before the students of Rabbi Akiva passed away, and now it's all about that, and it's about the mourning and everything. But before that, how was it celebrated? Because it had nothing to do with mourning.
Yeah, but
aside from counting the Sfira, but were there other? We didn't have that mourning aspect.
So we didn't. So the mourning aspect is not there, but still.
No, but were there other things that were like maybe? That were like emphasized that maybe fell to the wayside because
improvement of midos. That's what we're talking about. Counting up the sphere, prepared. Chesed shebechesed, gevurah shebechesed, tiferes shebechesed. All these days have titles attached to them. They all have.
Well, we know so little about them.
Yeah. So that's what we're here to talk about. So we need maybe because of the. Whatever we want to say, the lower standards or the lower level which we find ourselves. So we're attaching ourselves to like the mourning aspect or the discipline that comes from the mourning. But the truth is, we're counting up. One of the great questions is asked: how come we count during Sfira? Why are we counting up instead of down? Usually, we're waiting for a great event, Matan Torah, right? Matan Torah. Oh, Matan Torah, So, I remember the old rocket launching, right? Remember? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have liftoff. I remember you see even the films of it, the ground at Cape Canaveral is beginning to shake, So we count down. The person waiting for a great event counts down. Beautiful Zushtel, like a beautiful comparison, is that, and this leads to maybe to this point over here, is that when Yaakov Avinu had worked already 7 years for Rachel, right? So the pasuk, the verse testifies. This is when Yaakov Avinu's poetic soul expressing itself. It says those days, he worked 7 years for Rachel, and it was like a few days in his eyes because of his love for her. So whenever I find a chassan, like a week before a chassan, or 2 weeks before the chassan, I like to take the opportunity to say it with his word. I remember heard from one of my Rebbeim, he said, what was it like? It was like a few days in his eyes because of his love for her. You would think if he, loved her that much, then a day would have seemed like a month, and a month, should have seemed like a century, and a century should have seemed like a millennium. So it should have been 7,000 years in his eyes because of his love for her. We're like, what are you talking about? It was like a few days in his eyes because of his love for her. So someone would say because of it's a small price to pay. If I would tell you that you'd be able to work for 7 years and then you'd be a billionaire, he says, like, it's a small price to pay to suddenly get, such a, to own the Mona Lisa, he's getting Rachel. Wow, beautiful, amazing. That's who he's going to get for a wife. Okay. But one of my Rebbeim once wanted to say like this: there's a difference between how we experience time when when you're passive, and a different way we experience time when we're active. When we're active doing something, so time goes very, very quickly. Like it says in Pirkei Avos, Hayom hu katzer, v'hamalacha maruba. The day is short and the work is much. I remember one of my teachers told us. He says, "When is the day short? When the work is much. When you're busy, you got a lot to do. So suddenly, oh my gosh, where'd the time go? I only got half of what I need to get done." When a person, unfortunately, retires, and they retire from activity, they don't retire to a new activity or to some volunteerism or whatever it is. So all of a sudden, they're pushing the clock, and you're waiting for the pot to boil, waiting for lunch to come, waiting for the tea room to open, whatever it is. It becomes painful. So when a person's waiting for the toast to pop, he's waiting for the water to boil, waiting for the train to come, he doesn't have anything else to do, so time goes slow. But a person has, 7 years to become the fastest man on earth in order to compete in the Olympics, 4 years, or to study for the law boards or something like that. So time is going fast. Like I have 50 books to master and to review, and I have 1 year to prepare. A year can go by fast when a person has a lot of work to do. So 7 years can go by fast if he has his midos to improve. Because after all, Avraham Avinu, had a child from younger years. The ones that came from the younger years when he was 75. So that was a Yishmael that took a right turn off the stage of history. And Yitzchak had when he was already 60. So this one took a left turn. Esav took a left turn. So Yaakov Avinu was already getting to be he was an older person by the time he was having children. So he waited to purify his midos, so that the parchment that he's going to write on, because of his love for her, because of his respect, that he's dealing with Rachel, so he wanted it to come from his midos, from his more perfected midos, and therefore he knew he had 7 years to perfect himself, and therefore time went very, very quickly because of his love for her. So people working during these 7 days times 7 weeks times 7 weeks in order to prepare for Torah, that's the tzushtel. That's why we're counting up. 7 days have gone by. What have I accomplished already? 2 weeks have gone by. What have I accomplished? We have to be ready to clean out our kelim in order to be ready to be makabel the Torah. That's why this time is a natural. It's a natural in order for us to take the time out to talk about the concept of motivating change. Because to the extent that the vessel is ready to receive the Torah, that's the extent that we'll be ready to receive it. The Torah is going to come. Someone's going to stand there and pour a cup filled with chachma and kedusha, and if we come with a thimble, and if it's a dirty thimble, or just come with a symbolic, gesture, so that's not going to cut it. But no, thank you. But if we come, with a kos, with an empty kos, with an open heart that's filled with questions and with quests, then to that extent, the Kadosh Baruch Hu was going to open us up and pour into us chachma. So therefore, motivating change. There's possibility to making real change. Tikkun hamidos. So let's talk about a few different things. Sometimes it's very hard when a person's sitting in one place to try to figure out, what changes would I want to make? It might be a good idea. There's an old saying like this, and we experience this during Pesach time, that says, rich people get new furniture, and poor people rearrange furniture, right? You move the couches around. You move it. I find if you move some furniture around in the house, you just need them. Suddenly you start to take a look at things. You see how just moving, and opening up a window, and looking out that window, suddenly you feel like you moved to a different country. You get up at a different hour in the morning. You get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take a walk outside. You feel like you went to Paris or something like that. You feel like you went to Eretz Israel. There's a certain times if you just do a few little shinuim, a few little changes, and rearranging the svarim that are on the bookshelf. Sometimes they're sitting over there in a certain arrangement, and just rearranging them. Going to the svarim store and buying some new Torah books. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. In a little while, we'll talk about also the idea of buying a blank book. There's also, for me, one of my best friends, one of my great, things, we've spoken about it too many times. Here's my best friend over here. So rearranging furniture, is a thing that can jumpstart and motivating change. And also going to the svarim store and seeing what am I attracted to, that I can latch myself onto, because sitting in the same situation, again and again, we get used to the things the way they are. I remember one Erev Rosh Hashanah many years ago. I might have mentioned it before. I think on Tisha B'Av I might have mentioned it. That I remember I went to a mikvah. I wanted to get an early jump start, and I came to this mikvah, and there was this Englishman that was going into it. It was boiling hot, and he was going in. the fires of Gehinnom. He was there. He was the only one there. The fires of Gehinnom. I remember he was screaming out like he was edging his way into the hot water. Oh, the fires of Gehinnom. Oh, the fires of Gehinnom. Oh my gosh, I'm afraid to go in there. And I didn't hear him after a while. I also, came to my time. I prepared and I went in. It was hot. But after a while, you go in. Sometimes it's boiling hot. There's one I go to in the morning. It's boiling hot. But I get used to it. And I go edge my end, and there's a guy sitting over there with a head like a beach ball with steam coming up all around him. That was the same guy that was screaming 5 minutes ago. Is now sitting there, schwitz. And I couldn't help it. I shouldered up next to him and I said, "We get used to Gehenna, don't we?" Sometimes a person, complain like, "This is no good. This is no good. This is no good." But then we get used to, this is the way it is. We accept it the way it is. In order to change, sometimes we have to get ourselves into a different experience and to feel a little bit of a freedom. That's why we have Pesach. That's why we have matzah before Maror, and not the other way around. Because in order for a person to experience, to realize that the situation that they're in might be limited in a Maror situation, they have to get a taste of freedom. Klal Yisrael, when it came time for Exodus from Mitzrayim, we might have spoken about it before, but what did they do? Moshe Rabbeinu came and told Paro, says, give them a week. The Medrash says, give them a week, give them Shabbos off. So they took Shabbos off. Once they had a chance to think, and they had a chance for Shabbos, they say, wow, we've been missing out on freedom. Now, we don't want to go back to work. It's like after Pesach is over. I don't want to go back to the chametz lifestyle. You're afraid to touch chametz. You're afraid. So there's so same thing. You take this big winged eagle, and he's been sitting in a chicken coop, thinking he's just an awkward chicken picking up little kernels, and all of a sudden, he pecks his way open to the hole in the fence, and he jumps out, and he stands on top of the chicken coop, and all of a sudden he starts to spread his wings, and suddenly he's flying 2 miles up in the sky, and he looks down, and he sees the whole landscape, and the sun setting, and the sun rising, wow! And at the end of the day, you can hardly see, there's the town that the chicken coop was in, looking like a little dot on the map. And then, and you can't even see the chicken coop. At the end of the day, he comes right back down to his home. He crawls back into and the farmer comes and says, "Oh, somebody made a hole here in the top." And he closes up the, and now this big bird is sitting over there in the chicken coop saying, that was a chick. There's a chicken coop I'm living in, and I'm an eagle. I don't belong stuck in this place over here. Sometimes we open up a new vista, and we see something. We have the matzah, and then we look back and say, "Hey, that was Maror." But it's not Maror that we should suffer ourselves, but we got lifted up in order to now go back. He said, now we have to go back and make those changes ourselves. That's what Pesach is really about. Kadesh. Orchatz. Kadesh means we become purified, and then Orchatz, now go wash yourself off and get back there yourself. Kodesh Baruch Hu lifted us up on eagle's wings, and now dropped us back down on the ground, and said, now go learn about it, now go climb up there yourself. I remember I met with a lady, she had a near-death experience. I remember she broke her leg. She was stuck at home. So someone suggested, I was learning with business people, maybe you go learn with this person. I went, and she told me the whole story. She got thrown out of a car. Her daughter was driving. She could hear her child off in the distance. Apparently she was okay. And she knew it intuitively that her daughter was okay. And she said, I was in like the most peaceful garden. She was like out of her body. Until the paramedics came and they gave her life-saving resuscitation. All of a sudden she came back to her broken ribs and her broken legs and her pain-racked body. And she goes, but I'll never forget that feeling. She said, my daughter will be okay and she'll take care of herself. But she was ready to surrender to go to the next world. She said, that was the most peaceful garden. I understood. Gam ke'elech v'gates ha'mavis lo irara. I'm not afraid of anything. It was unbelievable. I said, well, now you got to have that same experience in body. Now that you had it out of body, now go have it in body. Kadesh Orchatz. Now go have it in the world, not on Yontif, not on Shabbos. Go carry that experience around with you. So therefore, sometimes we get just a new perspective, and then we realize that we've been living in the same old situation, and it's time to bust out. We find something of a new flavor in Torah, a new flavor. We're specializing in Tefillah this year. We're specializing in Tehillim. We're going to specialize in Chesed. I'm going to specialize in Sifrei Machshava. I'm going to specialize in something. Ein Adam lomed el masha chafetz libo. The Talmud says, the Chazal tell us, a person only learns that which his heart desires. Find something that's of your heart desire. That means going to a good Jewish bookstore, thumbing through some books, and walking away with I got the second volumes of Miktav Meliyahu, of the Strive for Truth in English now. Ooh, let me go through that and find out about the Avos and find out about the let me specialize in some new subject, whatever happens to attract. That's one thing. And the other thing is, I remember one time my wife and I were strolling through the neighborhood, and we live in pretty much, track houses, okay? They're all the same split level homes, same price, basically. Sometimes the kitchen's on this side and sometimes the living room's on that side, but it's basically all the same size. They're one design, just with a mirror approach on each side. And then one day my wife and I were strolling around the neighborhood and we saw that one of the neighbors, it was springtime, and they had this beautiful a garden. Now, like a Chinese garden. Ooh, a Chinese garden with lollipop trees and all kinds of interesting colored wood chips and wow, look at this, and these tulip-like trees all manicured. And the husband was out front and he was snipping the grass, this monkey grass, this thick grass with his like mustache scissors. And Arlene was out there like surveying everything. My wife and was strolling the baby, and we were walking around the block together, and we see they have these big, beautiful bay windows with lights, with plants in the window. Wow, look like fancy. My wife says, "What happened, Arlene? You came into like an inheritance or something? Like looks, like you really spoof things up in a good way." Is that right? Spoof is not good. Spoof is right. You improve things, okay? And you really, okay, you made it nice, So she said, so she goes, no. And I said, so what happened? What do we count for all the improvements? She goes, well, to tell you the truth, Chaya, she says, we fixed two tiles in the bathroom were broken. And she looked at my wife like, you got it? I said, no, what are you talking about? She says, there were two tiles that were broken in the bathroom. But we couldn't find the colors to match those two tiles. So we had to replace all the tiles in the bathroom. We did the whole bathroom tiling. Then we realized that the wallpaper is the old wallpaper from the previous administration. And so we changed it, and then we said, look at that medicine cabinet. After we changed the wallpaper, it's rusty. We'll get a new medicine cabinet. Now the bathroom was the nicest room in the house. We walked out and we saw that these floors, are from the previous owner, that they're scuffed up. So we had to polyurethane the floors. We put down a new thing over here. Wow! Now look at those windows as we walked out to the living room. They're leaky old windows. So let's get some Anderson windows. As long as we're putting Anderson windows, let's put in bay windows. Ooh, bay windows. We'll go deep pocket, put in some bay windows. What they put in the bay windows, they said we'll put some floodlights. We'll get some nice fancy plants here. But the bay windows look out into what type of a garden? This mushy, empty garden over here. Let's call up Guido the gardener and let's manicure the trees and let's put some make this one to a lollipop tree and this one into thing. We'll spread out some nice gravel into. Ooh, it'll be colorful, and everyone will cut. How did it start? It started with two tiles in the bathroom. Okay, that was the story that she told over there. So sometimes there's a statement in the Talmud that says "Tofasta meruba lo tofasta." Right? I know it sounds like an Italian restaurant. Tofasta meruba lo tofasta. Right? Tofasta mua tofasta. That's the opposite. Tofasta meruba lo tofasta means if you grab too much, you didn't grab anything. Right? Tofasta muat. But if you grab a little bit, then you grab something. Big changes, sometimes don't last. And especially a person can have big ideas and big dreams. It's good to have. But to make sudden changes, to suddenly say, I'm going to exercise, but I'm going to go out and I'm going to run 25 miles the first day. I'm going to run a marathon the first day, then you retire your sneakers and you never get back on the track again because you're hoarse and sore and pain. The next day you say, exercise is not for me, But a person goes out and they take a short walk and they say, I love the fresh air, or they take whatever little improvement the person make a little change. Little changes lead to big changes. That's, that's an important formula. And again, what type of change to make? Okay, so I'm going to refer to a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that has a few different components. One of them is say lecha rav, make for yourself a rav. Make for yourself a rav. Right? So there's a few different means. One is you need a teacher, which also helps. Sometimes you get somebody who can tell you something about yourself, then that's tremendous. That's a tremendous benefit to have. If I can get somebody. I remember I went to a doctor once, I was, I don't know if people remember, I was like, 50, 60 pounds heavier than I am right now standing in front of you, So I had a paraniki on my finger, and like it was a swelling and it could lead to a, to cellulitis. It could go into the veins, and I went to the emergency room for it, and I went to see a doctor friend of mine who's a hand surgeon. We're very close. And he said, Rabbi Label, step up on the scale. I said, no, it's my finger. He said, step up on the scale. I said, it's my finger. He said, step up on the scale. I said, okay. And he started moving those little gray bars over. I said, whoa, 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 whoa. I hadn't seen numbers like that before. Wow, I can't believe it, And he said, and he gave me what, 4? And he said, the finger this, but you gotta, he says, I run 7 miles a day. He says, and I eat whatever I want. So the next day I went out and bought sneakers, okay? And we were jogging around the block a lot. I was walking around the block and he was jogging circles around me as we were going around the block. He decided to help me. He's going to encourage me to go. After a while, he told me, he said, I don't know why you're huffing and puffing so much. He said, Rabbi Label, he says, used to be an athlete and muscles have memories. And I told him, I think mine have Alzheimer's. It's not working. I thought it would get easy at some point. But it was hard. But I started out walking around the block with him, and then it led to going out to the track and running 3 miles a day. That wasn't what helped lose the weight, just the opposite. Because sometimes you come out and you want to eat more because it felt like it justified. But the concept of having somebody who was able to tell me, a doctor, who was able to look at, to write something onto a chart and to tell me something like that. Wow. It's a priceless thing. If you can find somebody who's willing to tell you something that you need, that you'd be afraid to, that you'd be afraid to hear. I remember some of those, even though we don't want to hear it at the time. But I had other chavrusas also that, they were the toughest fellas. They were the best ones. Looking back, were the toughest ones. I remember when I was a bacher and I was starting to learn, so every time the door opened up, I would turn to say, I remember exactly where I was sitting, and the door to the yeshiva was a few feet to my right, and every time somebody walked into the base medrash, I would look up, hey, how you doing, and my chavrusa says to me, is there a connection between the door and your head? Is there like a string between your door? Every time the door opens up, your head moves? What are you, a puppet? You're a marionette? I said, no, I'm a sociable guy. Like he says, you didn't take time out from your life. He says, in order to socialize. He says, learn. And he put my face back into the door and reminded me, when the door opens, that's your business. And I would go answer the phone when the phone would ring. And I said, but somebody's trying to call somebody. He says, it's not your business. Your business is learning. It's not, okay. And sometimes you need somebody like a shtick drill sergeant who can tell you something about it. Asay lecha rav. But another meaning of asay lecha rav is to make yourself into the rav. Make yourself into the teacher. One of the best teachers in my kid's school, I remember one of the most popular teachers, they called him Rebs, and the kids loved him. He was like a cult figure almost, Rebs. He doesn't teach anymore. He went to start his own yeshiva. And somebody asked him, my wife told me that one of her best friends asked Rebs, how did you get to be Rebs? He says, because my whole life, he says, I could never find anybody who could relate to me. He says, in the right way. He says, so I decided I'm going to relate to other people. He says, in a way that they can be related to. He says, so I became Rebs. He says, so he became that Rav. Osei lecha Rav. Sometimes I can't find anybody. I can't find the Ravs. So become a Rav. Guy asked me, he wants to learn Hebrew. He says, Rabbi, how do I learn Hebrew? I'm not so good in my Hebrew skills. It's not so good. I said, you know what? Teach somebody else. He said, no, I told you I'm not good at it. I said, no, teach somebody else. If you teach somebody else, so it puts you on alert. You have to stay one lesson plan ahead, and then you have to master it. There's nothing like having to give a lecture. I'll tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you something. How did I get into this business that I'm in right now, doing this type of stuff? You know why? Because this is the only way I could motivate myself to learn. I was not interested only for academic. I was interested in certain things, but certain other things I was just not interested in. And I stood up and I spoke on Purim. We made a couple of jokes, and I was good at making plays. I said, oh, great, plays. And then I stood up and I spoke at Sheva Brachas, but I had to spend the whole day preparing and taking notes and highlighting and underlining until I prepared something. And then afterwards, I would spend hours thinking about, what went over, what didn't go over, until, I tried to, develop a whole envelope filled with, information that could be used in different situations, a whole repertoire. I had to develop a repertoire. And I find it got my brain in gear, because I'm a Baal Gaiva, and I'm afraid that that I'm gonna disappoint the class, or I'm gonna so having to prepare a talk and having to give over something makes asay lecha rav, it makes yourself into the rav, and suddenly you have to represent, because the Mishnah Perkep says Hu HaYomer, he used to say. Doesn't mean he used to say, but he was what he said. Hu Haya Omer. So then people say, when you can't do differently than what you're saying, then you realize that before you say it to somebody else, you got to say it to yourself 1,000 times if you really wanted to go into somebody else. Wow. So this is one of the most effective ways is to make a change in ourselves, is to say, let me see if I can have that type of hashpah, if I can make that type of influence on somebody else. Let me teach it to somebody else. If I can teach it to somebody else, then it's going to force me to master it myself. Another part of the Mishnah says, it says, acquire for yourself a friend. It's good to have a friend, good chavrusa, whatever. But another meaning of kanei l'cha chaver, we might have mentioned before. Here's my best friend over here. Kanei, let your pen be your friend. Yeah, I have two friends over here. Here's my two best friends. This one highlight, all over the place. If I find something, a smart phrase, if I find a deep saying in Tehillim, something nice in Mishlei, something great in Chumash, a Rashi or something like that. Wow! Suddenly, the heart goes on fire, and I highlight it. I say, I want to remember that one forever. Sometimes you just keep on highlighting it over and over and over again. Every time you see it, I say, wow, that's my best friend. I take a phrase like that and internalize it and hold on to it. And sometimes you take out a notebook. Here's the companion to my other best friend over here, right? Kanei l'cha chaver. Let your pen be your friend. What do you do with a pen? Okay? So you ask yourself some good questions. This is very important if a person wants to make certain improvements and certain changes in life, right? Is questions become the answer. Right? You start writing on the top of a page, which midah, if I worked on this midah, what would make the biggest difference in my life, right? Which midah? Sometimes it's hard to find a friend who's going to tell you the exact truth. Nobody wants to be brutal. Nobody wants to be that unnice, But we know the answers ourselves. I think if we get quiet enough, we probably know what the answer is, If we worked on anger, if we worked on not being so upset, if we worked on bitachon, if we worked on menuchas hanefesh, being peaceful with ourselves and being peaceful with other people. If we worked on, whatever it is, simchas achayim. Okay, some of these are general. And then to detailize, what does that mean? And it's possible for a person to eliminate anger from their life. If they decide that they want to. Just like it's possible for a person to give up chametz on Pesach, right? It's possible if a person understands that it's usher, it's forbidden. It's like bringing avodah zarah. It's a sin. Just like it's possible for a person to understand that if I do something, if I eat the wrong foods, it's usher. Same thing. If I do something which is dangerous to my system, that it upsets the equanimity of and equilibrium of my personality. So it could be sakana chamorim yisora, that danger is important. If I understand the importance of it, so you start with a little notebook. We start writing down the phrases that we find that we appreciate, that are written in Chumash, that are written in Rashi. We write them down. Keep little note cards. And say, these are the phrases that now become, I think we had spoken about it before, the Piyazetzner Rebbe says it's possible for a person to have actually nevuah, bizman hazeh. Prophecy. Yes, prophecy, right? We've spoken about it. Yeah, how do you have prophecy? The Piyazetzner Rebbe, the Eish Kodesh, says you can have prophecy nowadays. Prophecy. That's what he says. He says, not prophecy talking about the telling about the future. He says that ended by the beginning of Bias Sheni. He says, for the last 2,400 years, we've been a non-profit organization, okay? He says, but a different type of nevuah, a different type of prophecy. He says, what type of prophecy? He says, a prophecy of the person, he says, like the Kohen Gadol is looking into the Urim V'Tumim and he sees stones that are sparkling and he gets messages. He says, if I would distribute to everybody over here a Chumash, and said, let's come back in a year and, and give me 50 highlights, with friend number 1 over here, friend number 2, okay? Give me 50 highlights that you're going to underline, 50 psukim that, go slowly through it. Don't come back in 1 week and say, take a whole year. Let's come back. And then we're all going to come back. We're going to resubmit our chumashim that I distributed to everybody with a yellow pen, not on Shabbos, okay, not to be used on Shabbos, right? And we come back. What do you think the chances are? Even if we had 100 people here or 1,000 people here, what do you think the chances are we'll all come back with the same 50 psukim highlighted? What do you think the chances are? Yeah? Any mathematicians in the crowd over here? Right? What do you think the chances are? Probably none. Probably zero. It's near impossible. Underline a Rashi. We'll all take a sefer to Tehillim. We'll come back. We'll do the same experience. What do you think the chances are? None. Right? Because each one, he says, when sometimes a person is looking into Chumash, they're looking into Pirkei Avos, they're looking, and all of a sudden, he says, a phrase comes screaming out at them. He says, it takes you by your collar, it shakes you. He says, it turns you into a different person. He says, what's going on over here? He says, you've seen that pasuk before. We saw the movie, we read the book. Suddenly the Haggadah comes jumping out at you like, what happened over here? He says, where did that, whoa, oh, suddenly, you understand the new meaning and new insight. He says, what's happened over here? He says, that's the Bechina of Nevuah. He says, the Torah is whispering to you. You feel the soft breath. Sometimes, when you read the Svarim of the Chofetz Chaim, you can actually smell the sweet breath of the Chofetz Chaim speaking to you. He wrote wrote in such a way not to impress you all the time with his sophisticated lundus, but to express, and to reach you. And the same thing, if a person is learning Chumash and you're reading the Navi and you feel the Nevuah that's talking to you, he says that's the Bechina of the Torah. It's talking to us, and that's what we wish for every day when we back up in Shemon Esrei. We say V'sein chalkeinu b'sorasecha. Give us our portion in Torah amongst the other great things that we ask for, which is, Shebani Beis HaMikdash, Repair of Yameinu, all that great stuff. The same Chalkeinu B'Sorah Saka. That's our portion in Torah. That talks to us. And therefore, sometimes a person, is sitting quietly for a few minutes, for a half hour. Ask yourself a question before you even pick up the pen. And say, which midah, if I worked on this midah, would make the big difference before I go to sleep at night. Sometimes I plant a question in my mind. You wake up in the morning with answers. And sometimes the last dream that you have before you wake up in the morning, I need to work on this. If I'm going to work on that, that's going to make a huge difference in my life. Then I write down on a little piece of paper, and you write down for yourself like this. You want to make a huge change? Write down like this. Okay, that midah, or that action. If I would stop this thing, or if I would do this particular action, whatever it is, whether it's a kum asay, something to get up and do, or whether it's a los asay, something to refrain from doing, how will I feel in 5 years if I accomplish this thing? How will I feel in 5 years? How will I feel in 10 years if I accomplish it? How will I feel in 15 years? What difference will it make in my life if I accomplish this thing? And you get a picture, Ezehu Chacham Haroes Hanolad, the person who sees what's going to come out in the future. You actually visualize it. You write it for yourself, and you see what it's going to look like. If I can do this thing, if I can take control of this area of my life, wow. I'm not talking about biting off the whole thing, but little by little, over the course of time, progress. I set off on this course, and I stay committed to that course. Then how will I? How will my life be improved? Let me write down in vivid detail and color, how it will feel. It'll bring me closer to the chuppah. It'll bring me closer to my children. It'll bring me closer to my grandchildren. It'll bring me closer to Hashem. It'll bring me closer to my relationship with the people around me. It'll earn me a good name, a shem tov. It'll, all these different things. Not that I'm trying to, do it just to impress other people, but I'll feel so good about myself. I'll wake up in the morning with excitement, and I'll look in the mirror and I'll be happy to see the person who's looking back at me, and I'll feel so good about myself. And every day, and other people will look at me, and I'll be able to help other people. I'll find the key, not just to my own success, but I'll find the master key to help out other people. Wow! If I can just master this thing, that's what's really blocking me. If I can get over that, wow! And then how will it feel next to it, on a column next to it, on the next page, that you could look at? How will it feel if I don't? It's like it says in the end of Chumash, Rei, Nesati Lefanecha Chayim Be'amavis, I put in front of you life and death, a bracha v'klala, like har grizim v'har evel. Har evel, is a barren, wow, nothing happened, and har grizim was fountain with beautiful flowers and all kinds of it was blossoming, it was blooming. If I'll do this, this is going to be good. This is har grizim to me, and this is har evel to me. I have to make a visual demonstration to myself. If I can make a visual demonstration to myself, then and keep those two essays, laminated, on a page, someplace where I can see them on a daily basis. It's my screensaver. I'll scan it in and make it my screensaver. So when I look at it, I see these two mountains. I see these two possibilities. I put in front of you, ubacharta b'chaim, and choose life. That's what the Torah says ultimately. Then the person can gain leverage on themselves to try to do the right thing, to try to get themselves into gear, to do the something that they admit and they know themselves that this is the right thing to do, but not to gallop and to do it in a hurry. We said before, remember, tofasta meruba, lo tofasta, tofasta muat, tofasta, and so. You see the wisdom of this. It can be very, very powerful, very, very powerful and encouraging. That's not meant to discourage ourselves. You should know also that things don't go in a straight line. One of my teachers once told us his life is like a cardiogram. Boom, 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 boom. If it goes like this, then I mean, there's, akre los kadoshim emor. Then we're not alive anymore. So we know it goes up like this, it goes up like that. We said Pesach, we get lifted up only to get dropped down. Sometimes habolatayir Messiah so Kodesh Baruch Hu lifts us up, and we get a picture, and we get a good week of success, and all of a sudden, we get dropped down. Not to be disappointed, But we get dropped down from Gan Eden in order to climb our way back up to get it back and to earn it back. The first time we got it was a little extra, a boost in the middle, but we need a little help. We have to work up. It's a long, hard climb to get there ourselves. That's why it's important that if we put that picture in front of our eyes, then we're going to earn it. And the truth is that whatever we earn is better than anything that could be given to us. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu would give it to us, it wouldn't feel like our accomplishment. I had a friend of mine. There's a big competition in the kindergartens, in the school systems, like who's going to get the best kindergarten teacher, because that's going to draw in the students. And once they're in that school, the parents are not likely to transfer. So you got to get the best artist and the most creative Mora, for kindergarten. So one of my friends, he lives in Israel now. He sent his daughter Sarah. She's not married. He sent her to a local gan, and she came home on Simchas Torah, right in the beginning of the year, they have to send in 4 bottles, that they can fuse together to make them like a Sefer Torah, right? And this kid came home with a Sefer Torah. He said that looked like a Sefer Torah. You didn't want it to touch the floor. It was like Zos HaTorah. It was so kapached. It was so beautiful. It was a mamish piece of work. And his daughter came home and she threw it onto the ground and stepped on it. Oh my, OMG! What did you do, Sarah? What are you doing, Sarah? The Torah. He said, why did you throw it on the ground? He said, the Mora painted this, and the Mora put on the sparkles, and the Mora did everything. She didn't do anything. So he transferred her out of that God. In order to impress the parents, so the teacher did everything, but the kid didn't feel any ownership. The whole reason why we came into this world is so we shouldn't eat the Nechama de Kisufa, the bread of shame. Kodesh Baruch Hu could have put us right into Gan Eden and say, see, you did it. It made it as if we went through a life of struggle and difficulty. But it's not going to feel the same. This is not a virtual reality. This is a reality. Reality is when you go through, when you struggle, there's nothing like. So you put her in a class the way you don't have to color in the lines. You came home with some paper that was, with a heavy black crayon, like out of the lines, all over the place. This is mommy. And they put it on the refrigerator. She was kissing it, so happy. Kiss mommy now. That's mommy's black shape. So she was so happy to, she did it. It was grotesque, but she did it. That was her accomplishment. So the better the person comes out with their own grotesque art, than something that somebody else did for them. That's why I might have mentioned before that one of the things that we do on Friday nights at our house is that we go around the table and we ask, what do people feel accomplished by on Friday nights? Yeah, I mentioned it before. What do you feel accomplished by on Friday nights? What do you feel accomplished by? What gave you a feeling of accomplishment this week? I know that one of my daughters is going to say, what was it? That we put the Pesach stuff back or something like that. I remember something happened at the end of this week. I say, my daughter said, that's going to be my accomplishment. She drove all the way back from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She's not a highway driver, and she drove back in Bubby's car, and she's not allowed to drive on highway alone, whatever. But she drove all the way back from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She's all of 17 years old. She's so excited. That's an accomplishment. There's something, and we usually find out that the things that people say is not something, I got the shoes I wanted. No. Is that the accomplishment was, I did something that was difficult to do, or something I did for somebody else. An older bacher sitting at the table on a Friday night says, I had a nice conversation with my mother. And we go, hum ba ba bum ba hum ba ba bum bum ba ba bum 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 bum. Here's a guy, 40-something years old, not married yet, but he had a nice conversation with his mother. He feels good about it. He didn't take the bait when she said, why don't you make something out of yourself? Why don't you get married already? What are you doing sitting in yeshiva now? He should be working on this. Whenever he's doing this, he should be doing that. Whenever he's doing that, he should be doing this. He said, okay, Mom, thank you very much. Thank you for advice. Thank you, I appreciate it. He didn't get into it. He didn't take the bait. So he said, I had a nice conversation with him. He walked into Shabbos feeling good about himself. That's what he takes into Shabbos. I remember there's a bacher sitting next to him on the same Friday night, and he said, I finished the whole Sefer Tehillim every day this week. A bacher from Or Samech. Every day this week I finished the whole Sefer Tehillim. Wow. So for him, that was an accomplishment. The next guy sitting next to him says, I made it to Shacharis 3 times this week. Shacharis 3 times, for a guy starting out at Or Samech, that's gewaltig to make it to Shacharis 3 times. No one's accomplishment is comparable to anybody else's accomplishment. Just like nobody's chumash is going to come back with the same highlights on it, because everybody's working on a different, level on the ladder, different ladder of accomplishment. One of my daughters says, I got an 85 on a math test. And somebody says, that's not a good grade. So the math whiz in the family says, it's not a good grade. She goes, I'm not so good at math. I struggle at it. I studied very hard, and I thought I was going to fail. I'm happy with an 85. Right? We had some young lady came to our table, and And she does all these weird things at the table and this and that. She's not a little nudnicky type. I don't know, whatever. Sometimes you have guests that are, like she's always doing these distracting things. She's got a bag full of food, like Mary Poppins. She's always pulling things out of the bag and what's coming out next, and she brings, I don't know, whatever. So my daughter's like, oh no, and she said, she told her, what do you feel accomplished by? She told her how she got so insulted by somebody said something terrible to her, and it was like how can somebody say that, like directly to somebody? And she goes, and I decided, Hashem is just testing me, and I didn't say anything back. I just smiled at the person, and I felt good, and I decided I'm going to love them. And she told him, and my daughter's like, wow, she's like an angel. She's not a human being. This lady's esteem in their eyes went up like 1,000 points. Like, wow. We don't know what it's like to live through such a test like that, and she went through that test and didn't take it personally. Wow, we just can't. It's just something to behold. So by doing these difficult and sometimes struggling things, and by facing the headwinds and succeeding to the extent that we succeed, that's the extent that we feel good about ourselves when we come into Shabbos. And that's the extent that we'll feel good. If it's hard, lefum tzara agra, we'll feel better after 5, 10, 15 years that I did this thing that was hard, that was difficult for me to do. And that's why Reb Tzadok Cohen says that sometimes the most difficult thing for us to do is the place where our greatest accomplishment really is buried. Wow. Which means, I remember one of my rabbis told us, it was hard for me to even look him in the eyeball. He told us that he drowned a cat. He says, I have a terrible cruel streak inside me. He went through the Holocaust. He went through a lot of things. He survived as a young child. He said he drowned a cat. But he just didn't drown the cat. He said it came out of the bag, he threw it back in, and he persisted until he drowned the cat. So, oh my God. I couldn't even hear shir from him for like weeks after that, until it sort of got out of my memory, And yet he's an enormous Baal Chesed. He says, when I realized I have this cruel streak, this callous on my personality, and the overcoming of it, he says, it forced me to do Chesed. I was forced to overcome it and to do Chesed. And he says, and I had to become a Baal Chesed. He says, to overcome it. I once read someplace that the Chafetz Chaim held himself to be a Baal Kas. That doesn't mean he acted on it, and that he was a Baal Lashon Hara, but he felt that tendency. And the Gemara says, Misha Godel Mechavero Yitzro Godel Meno. The greater somebody is, the greater is the opposition, the greater is the Yetzer Hara that they have. So if he would have been a sweet little pussycat, that couldn't say nothing bad about nobody ever, so he would become a pussycat. He wouldn't have become the Chafetz Chaim. He wouldn't have to write the Sefer Shmiras HaLashon. He wouldn't have to write any of it, But since he felt there's an undertow pulling him this way, he had to swim against the tide of his personality to develop that muscularity that makes somebody into the Chafetz Chaim. Yeah? So the greater the person uses, force the person uses to overcome it, then sometimes it means that's the thing that the person could be working on. And in fact, the Gemara says that Vayara Lekimas Kol Ha'asa V'hinei Tov Ma'od. When the Kodesh Baruch Hu finished creating the whole world, everything was Tov, 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 and suddenly the world is Tov Ma'od. What's Tov Ma'od? What's Tov Ma'od? So some of them Mefarshim say Tov Ma'od does mean everything is good. Like you have all the ingredients for the chicken soup, the kosher chicken and the filtered water, and you have fresh whole onion, and you have the carrots and the potatoes, whatever else ingredients, and the oil, and you have all the spices, all kosher, good, and you put it together, and now I hear a symphony when it all comes together and it coalesces. And the synergy of all the component parts together, that is Tov Ma'od. That makes it very good. What's that?
How does it? The something is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, the total is greater than the sum of its parts. That's how we would think. That's a logical approach. The Talmud always has something surprising to say. It says Tov Ma'od amongst a few other things. Tov Ma'od. What's very good? Zu Yetzer Hara. Tov Ma'od is the Yetzer Hara. Okay, if a person didn't have to know that if it was sunny, like it never rains in sunny California, whatever. If we were living in San Diego all the time, so we wouldn't know what a good day is. We wouldn't know what a bad day is, because it would all be good days, But since we have a winter, and then suddenly spring comes, so we have 20 days in the year that emulate, that look like and feel like La Jolla or La Jolla, like in near San Diego. But so Tov Ma'od, so we didn't have a contrast, so we wouldn't know. But another meaning, Tov Ma'od to Yetzer Hara, is the area where the person's Tov Ma'od. That's where the Yetzer Hara is, And where the person has the Yetzer Hara, that's where he's Tov Ma'od also. That's what Reb Tzadok Cohen says. You have a kid that has a midah of generosity. Oh, they like you give him $10, Bubby gives him $10, he puts it right into the pushka. Oh, he's such a sweet kid. But he doesn't know how to take care of himself. He feels so empathetic. Feels so sensitized to other people's feelings that when the Rebbe rebuked somebody in such a way that the other kid was hurt, he felt his pain. Doesn't want to go to school the next day. He said, what do we do about that? Somebody else is so organized, but so organized that they're a control freak. And nobody can touch anything, and they got to eat the potatoes, and the potatoes shouldn't touch the peas and shouldn't touch the meat, and they got to, everything is in its own compartment, until this touched that thing, and now I'm not eating it, and he touched it, and oh my God, too much. Tov ma'od zu Yetzirah. It's good to be organized, but not so organized to the extent that now you have to have control over everything. Everything has to be, the duckies have to be lined up the way you want them to line up, or else your life is out of control. So the person has to be firmed up in a way that the good character trait is not lobotomized, is not removed, and yet it has to be firm so that the person has to be adjusted so that they don't lose the good trait, the very good trait that they have. Become sensitized in this way, but not sensitized in that way. So sometimes you find that the area where the person has the greatest weakness, that's where the greatest potentiality for success remains also. With the Zu Yetzirah, we want to find out, that's where the person can be told ma'od. Right? You can imagine, just analogy-wise, that remember when there was a Cold War in Russia, right? Was aiming its missiles at the United States. We each had missiles. We all had loaded guns at each other. And then what happened is, let's say we peek into the Kremlin, we find out they have 450 warheads pointed at a sensitive place somewhere out in Wichita, Kansas, and we go out into the plains of, the United, in the wide open plains out there, and we said, what do they want over here? Oklahoma, I don't know what, and they said, what's out here? They said, there's a little cabin with a guy in the front, porch, smoking a pipe and petting his sleeping dog, Boo, is lying over there, So you wonder, what do they want? What's the guy got in the pipe? Must be, what are they so afraid of? 450, nuclear warheads pointed at this spot over here. But then you scratch a few miles deep underneath the surface, you find out that America has an arsenal over there, and they got a silo that we have 700 warheads pointed at all their sensitive places over there. So, so from the fact that they have something pointed on this spot over here, that means that that's where, they're identifying. If the Yetzirah is pointing on something strong within us, and they found the pressure point, somehow the enemy knows us better than we know ourselves. The Yetzirah can indicate to us where it is that the person can gain their greatest area of success. So if we want to be boidek ourselves, we want to check ourselves and find out if I want to make the greatest accomplishment, in my life. I want to make the tikkun that I need to make, right? So where am I struggling the most? That's a good question to ask on the top of a page. Which area am I struggling most? If I can conquer that, if I can whittle away that mountain, then wow, that's going to be, that's going to lead to the fruit. That's going to lead me to the sweet fruit, which is going to be the accomplishment of my life. That's where it's all about. If I can just overcome that area, I'm not going to do it all at once. I remember once I came to Reb Mordechai Schwab, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, they called him the Tzaddik of Muncie. He was the Tzaddik of Muncie. And I came to him, I was struggling with a certain thing that, whatever, Ben Adam Lachavero thing, it was a certain, reaction I'm having to certain types of situation, whatever it was. And I came to him and I told him, Rebbe, I said, this is, this is crippling me. It's killing me. I can't, this thing is, and I remember he was rubbing his heart like this, and he was saying, repeating to himself, "Oy, v'tahir libeinu la'avdecha be'emes. Oy, v'tahir libeinu la'avdecha be'emes." You ever saw such a person like this? You never saw such a person like this. I promise you. He was stunning. He worked so hard on himself. He said he closed his eyes and he was feeling what I was going through. He says, I'm working on this. He says, I'm suffering from the same thing. He says, I'm working on it for 50 years. He says, and it's just starting to go away. That's what he told me. He's working on it for 50 years. Him working on it for 50 years. His avoda, for 50 years, and it's just starting to go away. I remember I felt like fainting right there, I didn't even recognize that it's a real problem yet, and he's working on it for 50 years, and it's just starting to go away. In a certain way, I think he wanted to encourage, that don't think you're going to knock this out. This is a lifetime of avoda, a lifetime of work, and in overcoming it, this becomes the mission statement, that I'm here to overcome this. I'm here to squelch this. I'm here to avoid, whatever it is that happens to be, that will turn out to be my mission statement in life. right? Somebody who's an addict, or somebody who had, I can't even, say somebody who had a terrible traumatic experience in life, Young lady came one time, I remember it was an Ornava Shabbaton, and we sat and we talked for a long time into the night, and she had a traumatic experience in life. I said, Kodesh Baruch Hu made it so you're not going to be, you can't be neutral in life, You either become great or you're going to become crazy, but you can't remain. I used to tell the prisoners the same thing. You're either going to become great or you can become crazy, but you can't remain the same. That's it. That's how it is, So that's the heart behind. You have to choose life, And you think you're the only one who went through this? No, I'm not the only one. So, so you owe it to other people to help yourself so you can be a resource. No, you're not a reject, you're a resource. And in the overcoming of it, you're going to get the master key, and it's not something that you're just going to, be able to wipe it away or sweep it clean, You're going to spend the rest of your life becoming great. This is what's going to make you great, in the overcoming of this thing. This now becomes your mission statement. That's what it's all about. It's not just something you work on this year till Shavuos and Mazel Tov, now we go back to the cheesecake, This is something that you're going to have to work on for the rest of your life, like somebody who got over alcoholism or somebody who got over, gambling or something like that. Then their avoda now becomes to tell the truth. And their avoda now becomes, not to touch wine. Now their avoda becomes, to try to help other people, from falling into such a thing. And in doing so, by helping themselves, they actually become a tremendous resource to help other people. It becomes their mission statement in life, that you're somebody who become an example. And therefore, when a person writes down, we said before, writing down all of these, these lists, how will it be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? You'd be surprised, that not only will a person, you see yourself as having taken yourself out, but people will be coming to you and asking you, how did you do it? How did you accomplish it? How, can you help me? And having helped other people also to overcome, you don't have to make somebody, to be involved with big tshuva, but help people to overcome, because they'll recognize, that you overcame it. You become a resource, a tremendous resource to other people in having perfected it. There's so many different, how did the Chofetz Chaim become the Chofetz Chaim? How did the Shari Tshuva become the Shari Tshuva? Right? They also tripped up. The Talmud says, Ein Adam Omen al Divrei Torah, ela im kein nichshel bo tchila. A person doesn't stand on a piece of Torah unless he tripped up on it first. So a person goes back and they look at our account books of debits of even things that had gone wrong, of the places where the Yetzer Hara had been most victorious, and it turns out that the Yetzer Hara becomes our best friend in the totality, in the final summary, because we look back and we say sometimes that's what also means to make a bracha on the morrow after having exited the matzah, because we look back and we realize that it showed us where our weakness is. If that's where our weakness is, and you showed us where our weakness is, thank you very much. When you get a hole in the tire, and sometimes you want to check out the tire, they blow it up, they fill it up with air, they put it into like a little, I don't know if you've ever watched them do it. They put it into a little tub of water, they roll through, and all of a sudden they see the air. Oh, that's where the air is escaping. We're going to plug that up. And the guy does his thing over there. Wow, that nail that got into the tire over there. But this guy found it by seeing where's the air escaping from? Where am I losing? Where am I losing in life? And therefore it becomes a help. It becomes actually, and they put that extra rubber thing in there and they snip it off. That becomes the most firm part of the tire. The rest of it, has to be, is not as rehabbed, is not as firm as that part where the plug went in. So, the same thing. These are the areas that a person can potentially work on, and these are the motivations, because it really becomes our mission statement and our purpose in life. That's really what it's all about. So if we can, figure out at this time of the year, where's the, where were we most damaged by the chametz of life? Where were we most damaged by the Yetzer Hara? And we say, listen, if I had to pick on one thing and start an actionable program against it, one action, that means I'm committed to doing that program. One action. That means, like I tell you, when this fellow told me I run 7 miles a day, I went out and I bought sneakers. At least that was, a step in the right direction. But it means, I'm committed, to go out and buy a notebook, and start to write in that notebook. To me, that also makes is a commitment. I'm starting to, let me start to make a list of my goals in life. Let me start to make a mad list. Let me write out 100 things, even if it takes up a few pages. Write down 100 things and pick out the one that's the most actionable, one that looks like I can make some accomplishment. And to write down my accomplishments every day. Let me write down one accomplishment every day. Let me write down one appreciation every day. And these are the type of small things, small steps that a person can do that will lead hopefully to big things. And then of course there comes that big mountain. I'll just finish up one idea over here. The Gemara says that in the end of times, that Mashiach is going to come, and the Yetzer Hara is going to get slaughtered. It's a Gemara in Nun Beis Mesechtes Sukkah. It says the Yetzer Hara is going to get slaughtered. Wow. And it says, Hein Bochen Behein Bochen. These ones are crying and these ones are crying. Tzaddikim are crying and Rashoyim are crying. So the Tzaddikim are crying and they're saying, how did we conquer such a big mountain like this? They're going to look at the Yetzer Hara like it's a big, tall mountain. And the Rashoyim are crying and said, they look at it like a se'ir, like a hair. And they said, how did we conquer this? How did we conquer, how can we get stopped? How do we get stopped by this silly little ridiculous hair? I saw once a beautiful comment from the Marsha. He says like this, that we know that Esav, right, was built himself an estate on the Ponderosa over there. At which mountain? What was his mountain?
Seir.
And Har Seir. Seir he's a hair mountain, right? And therefore the tzaddikim are crying at the accomplishment, like, wow, how did we make such a big accomplishment? The Rishonim said, we got stopped by such a small thing. Ultimately, I was caring what other people think about me. Some little, like, oh, what are my friends going to say? Such a silly little thing stopped me, peer pressure, stopped me from making my big accomplishment of life, because I didn't have time, because I was doing what? I was talking on the cell phone, I was doing what? What was I doing that I didn't have the time? And as I look back, I don't even know what I did with the time. I didn't have time to do the thing that I was supposed to do to help myself. I didn't even find the time to sit down and to write in the notebook. I was too busy. I was, so distracted. Distracted with what? Those little hairs. And the tzaddik comes back and he says, I don't know how I conquered that mountain. It was a mountain of hairs. It was one little accomplishment. He didn't mean he didn't have a Yetzer Hara. He beat his Yetzer Hara one hair at a time, one hair at a time, one hair. But the cumulative accomplishment of beating it one hair at a time, one hair. Even the Vilna Gaon had to learn one word at a time when he's learning the Gemara, right? Even a long distance runner who's running a marathon, who's running 26 miles, has to do it one step at a time. The smallest journey begins with a single step. So nobody said, suddenly he jumped 26 miles. The Vilna Gaon suddenly jumped through Shas. It didn't happen like that. And this one, jumped into Iyun Tefillah. No, they had to do it one step, one word at a time, and say, listen, I have my goal, I have my vision, I have my idea, and this is what I'm going to accomplish. And over the course of a lifetime, the person looks back and says, something? I look back and I realized I conquered a giant mountain. It was a mountain of hairs. That's what makes a difference. So life is made up of small accomplishments, and there's no job which is too small for the big person, right? So those are some things to maybe contemplate about and to motivate change. And maybe the first thing to do is get a notebook. Here, get yourself a friend. And if you can't find a friend to talk to, then get some of these friends. I belong to a support group that if I pass by a stationery store and I see blank paper, I go in and I buy it, or I find myself, my wife says, where are you? You're in the store such a long time. I was looking at blank paper. I don't know, blank paper inspires me. I don't know why. Pens and blank papers, I just look at it. I see potential. Maybe that's what it is. It's something about blank paper. Somebody once got me a notebook, a blank notebook. It was the most intimidating thing in the whole world because you don't want to put the first note into that notebook over there. But once you get started, you say, listen, I'm going to write down a good question for myself. What do I have to work on? So what are 100 things that I can accomplish in my lifetime? What are 2 things every day I feel grateful for? Wow. You'll see you'll be in a different world if you just do a few of these little exercises every day. A little hair, one hair at a time. Okay. Thank you very much for the time. Yeah, question?
Yeah. You said Kaddish, it's a cleansing, yes?
Kadesh is lifting up. Actually, we're being made pure, or chatz. Usually it works the other way around. The Gemara says, if a person makes himself a little bit holy, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mekadshim also harbe. You do the purifying, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will eventually lift up.
Yeah.
On Pesach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifts us up. That's the chesed of Pesach. We get lifted up. We get a free trip out of Mitzrayim.
Yeah, I understood this. But Kaddish and Kaddish when person passes away.
The words are related. It means to make holy, make special. We're making Hashem's name special in this world. Kaddish. We're saying Kaddish. It means we're saying Hashem's name. Yiskadal v'yiskadal. Hashem's name should be made holy, should be sanctified. So we're sanctifying the name of Hashem. That's what Kaddish means. Okay. Thank you everybody for listening. Appreciate the time together.